Hey everyone, Tom Salemi here. Happy holidays and happy new year to you. This is going to be our last episode of the Device Talks weekly podcast for 2022, but we'll be back the first week in January. We have a great episode already lined up, great interview already completed. So today we're bringing in the entire editorial team to talk about the top 10 stories of 2022. We'll have, of course, my co-host Chris Newmarker, executive editor of Life Sciences here at Mass Device. We'll have Jim Hammerand. He's managing editor of Medical Design and Outsourcing. We will have Danielle Kirsh. She's our senior editor and works on a variety of our publications, including Mass Device. We'll have Brian Buntz, our pharma editor, talking a bit about the pharma side of life. And finally, of course, associate editor Sean Whooley will be a major contributor to this conversation. So it's been a real pleasure to bring this podcast to you almost each and every week of 2022. Excited to bring you more in 2023, more Device Talks weeklies, more Stryker talks, more Medtronic talks, more intuitive talks, and more other series. They'll be coming your way. I know I've been talking about this, but they are coming. So make sure you do subscribe to the Device Talks podcast network so you don't miss one episode, you don't miss any of these critical insights. Finally, before we begin, we'll be rolling out the agenda for Device Talks Boston in January 2023. We'll open for registration there as well. So keep an eye on devicetalks.com for information about that event. And we'll be starting season 3 of Device Talks Tuesdays. So keep an eye on that as well. We already have a more than a couple of dozen episodes scheduled, a lot of great sponsors lined up to tell their stories. So I'm excited to get started in the new year. But thank you again for your support. It means a great deal to all of us here at WTWH Media, Device Talks, and Mass Device, and Medical Design and Outsourcing, and our other publications. We really do appreciate your taking the time to listen to our coverage and our insights and our interviews, and looking forward to connecting with you even more in 2023. All right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Hey everybody, this is Tom Salemi. Welcome back to the final episode of the Device Talks weekly podcast. I'm here with our entire team. We'll start with our every week co-host, Chris Newmarker. Chris Newmarker, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Tom. Doing well. I feel really awake today after shoveling snow in 7 below temperatures. It's invigorating.
So, someone called you out on LinkedIn for talking up Minnesota too much. Did you see that?
I did. I mean, it's a great place. I mean, of course, I noticed the person who did that's from New Zealand. Which I have not visited, but it looks like an awesome place. I definitely I will be happy to talk up New Zealand someday if when I make it out there.
Yeah, I think that maybe he'd be willing to host you, and you can contrast and compare, and we can report back on the podcast. How's that sound?
There you go. I mean, New Zealand, probably cold. Parts of New Zealand at least cold in our summertime. I mean, they're down southern hemisphere, so
yeah, and they have hobbits and orcs. So
yes,
yeah.
There you go. It'd be great to have our first orc on Device Talks Weekly.
Well,
the eye of Sauron is upon you.
Nerd alert. We have our entire editorial team here today.
I'll put my wizard hat away.
We're going to do our year-end wrap-up. I'll start on my far right on the Zoom screen. We have senior editor Danielle Kirsh. Danielle, hello.
Hey, Tom. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you back. It has been a little while. We were getting an update before we pushed record on the amount of wildlife in your backyard. How is set the scene for us, Danielle? What are we dealing with now? Barry the groundhog has moved on to I was going to say greener pastures, but they live underground, so browner holes. I don't know where they go, but what's going on?
Yeah, my backyard is now we call my backyard Critter Corner just because I've got a couple of possums now. There's a raccoon. I've had a skunk for a while, 2 skunks.
Oh,
don't ask me how I know.
Did you just smell them? You're like,
I pulled into my driveway one day and there was one just in the middle of my yard, and I was scared to get out of my car because I thought it was because I would have to walk. Yeah, I thought I was gonna have to walk past it to get to my door. But yeah, we got Randy the possum, and then there's another possum, aptly named Sandy, Randy and Sandy.
You have a Noah's Ark situation going on there. You realize it. Are you preparing for some global apocalypse by gathering all these animals?
I'm just naming them the first thing that comes to mind.
Well, that's great. And we have, I'll move. I've already said hi to Chris Newmarker, Jim Hammerand, managing editor of MDO. Jim, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, hey there, Tom. Thanks for having me. Always good to be here.
You've got more snow, or as much snow, I think, than Chris Newmarker out there in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I moved here after 13 Minnesota winters, and they all said no snow. I even left my the scraper and the brush in my car. I threw it away when I was driving. I realized my mistake in the mountains of Wyoming, of course, where I was on the drive out using a T-shirt to wipe off all the snow that had accumulated. But yeah, we're snowed in here. Like we got some ice storms on the way too, so I might lose some power here. But hoping for a white Christmas, probably frozen over Christmas here too. Still, it's fun to get the kids out there. You know, we got the toddler, we got the 1-year-old. The toddler just loves sliding around in the car on the ice. She says, "Go faster, go faster." Like, calm down, Ricky Bobby. It's all right. We're gonna get there soon enough.
That's right.
And, we'll get there safe. But they're all having a good time, and it's treasuring these moments.
Well, that's great. No, it's less fun when they like driving in the snow when they're 16. So enjoy those times while you have it. But and we've got associate editor Sean Whooley. Sean, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. No snow or wildlife to report on here in Somerville, Massachusetts, but
Sean does have a string of very sad unlit Christmas lights behind him that he refuses to illuminate.
They go on at night.
Come on, man. We gotta get this party started. All right, fine, leave them on.
Are you still feeling a glow from the World Cup final, Sean?
It's worn off a little bit, and considering I have no real allegiance to Argentina, it's not really my victory, but I did enjoy it a lot. It was a
really good game.
Cap to the weekend. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my dad was from Argentina, and I did not get to watch the game, but I did see the highlights. So he's happy wherever he is, I'm sure. Well, good to have you back, Sean. And finally, we have Brian Buntz, our pharma editor. Brian, welcome. Been a little while to have since you've been on.
It's great being back. Thanks for having me.
How much snow do you have in San Francisco, Brian?
It's really chilly this morning. I went jogging. I think it was in the high 40s.
Oh, rough, man.
I think it's in the 50s now. I'm shivering.
Wow, yeah.
They do get wildfires, so,
And quakes, yeah. They have
and quakes.
But we're here for it's the holiday season, and it's time to do the newmakers, newsmakers of 2022.
That's right. So Chris has chosen his top 5.
The top 5
articles or stories of the year, and each of us has put on our little newsmakers hat and come up with one of our own. So we're going to work through Chris's. Chris will give one, Danielle will give one, Chris will give one, Jim will give one, and we'll go through the entire list until we have our 10 top news items of the year. And excited to find out what everyone's focusing on. So, Chris, without any further delay, let's get our newsmakers going. What's number 5? Or number 10? Let's say, what's number 10?
Here we go. We'll say number 10 here. Number 10 would be, Medtronic is rolling along with plans to divest some of its of their business units, and this has actually become a big story on mass device this year, especially after Bloomberg reported that. They had sources saying that there's interest from Siemens Healthineers and GE Healthcare potentially in buying some of these businesses. It's starting out with the company's patient monitoring and respiratory interventions businesses. Those are the two that they're planning to spin out for now. And there's also plans to start a kidney care business with DaVita.
Yeah, and there was talk of bigger spin-outs as well from Medtronic, or at least there was speculation about their diabetes business and things like that.
Yeah.
But that never came to pass.
Yeah, they seem to be saying that they're going to stick with diabetes for now. So, and I know Jeff, their CEO Jeff Martha, in their most recent earnings call was, saying that they're moving along with warning letters with FDA.
Mm-hmm. And they've got their new head of diabetes, Q Delara, who actually comes to Medtronic, I think was it Oracle? No, where was she previously? But they're definitely taking a different tact with Medtronic. I'm sorry, with diabetes, and that they wanted to sort of be like the Apple of the diabetes business. So they certainly have doubled down in that space.
No, it was interesting from my perspective that obviously when some analysts suggested it was going to be diabetes, I've been keeping my ear close to the ground to see, what might come of that. But it seems like they're going in a different direction, and I'm now very intrigued by, as you mentioned, what they're going to do with that business, because it seems like they got to resolve that letter first and then see what happens.
Absolutely. I think they're making progress on that. And I'm going on the LinkedIn machine. And Q Delara was with Honeywell prior to joining Medtronic. She was president and CEO of Honeywell Connected Enterprise.
It's definitely a space where they want to be, more competitive. So, I mean, they've had some, criticism from analysts asking if they could execute and, really, make good on some of their plans. But, they definitely this year seem to have, set themselves up for some, good stuff in the future. So, well, it'll be neat to watch.
Yeah, there was talk.
Frankly, Tom, it hasn't just been Medtronic that's divesting and doing, spin outs. This seems to be happening everywhere. I mean, we already had like the spin out of Zimmer Biomet's, spine and dental business, ZimVie. We've had, we've had 3M Healthcare is going to become an independent company. GE Healthcare is becoming an independent company.
Oh, that's right.
And then, there's, BD spinning out its diabetes business in Becton. I mean, Sean, you were just writing about their financials just the other day.
Yeah, it was good timing that their earnings came out right before this call, but it's an interesting company to watch because they've obviously got the built-in experience of being BD's diabetes business for however many years, and now operating on their own, they're trying to sort of break through and move towards, they're developing a new patch pump for type 2 diabetes, but analysts are still kind of unsure which way to move on them because they haven't really gotten any updates. And it's been, I guess, 9 months since it spin out. I think it was April that it officially became a standalone company. So it's I guess it's still early going, but it'll be interesting to see if they come out with anything beyond the fact that it's got breakthrough device designation from the FDA.
Yeah, the analysts definitely seem to have a wait and see approach with them.
There's been several spin-offs in pharma too. Like this year, GSK spun out Haleon for $36 billion to make toothpaste and over-the-counter kind of drugs. So it's been a big theme in pharma as well over the years.
I always love how in the pharma space, deals that we consider huge in medtech are like minuscule by pharma proportions. It's just like oh, there's just a $38 billion spinoff there. It's just like
There was also that spin out last year with involved Pfizer with this company Viatris. That's a big kind of like generics company. Pfizer had a division called Upjohn that was part of that.
Interesting stuff. Yeah, no, I'm not sure. And then, of course, we're seeing Johnson & Johnson sort of separating from its consumer business and becoming Johnson & Johnson Medtech. So it's definitely a rearranging of the furniture in the life sciences space. We'll see where if this continues in 2023. All right, well let's move on to number 9. Danielle, you're taking this one. What is number 9 on our news of 2022?
I chose diversity in medtech being one of the top news items of the year. I did a lot of analysis of the top 100 medical device companies in the world of their C-suites and found that just 23% of the top executives at those companies are women. And that number was up 2 percentage points from 2021. But throughout the data, I found that in the last 3 years, women in medtech have had huge accomplishments. Simply within the top 100 companies, there were 50 new C-suite appointments this year in 2022. And in 2020, there were 37. new appointments. And then in 2021, there were 34. So within the last 3 years, women have moved into 121 new roles. So it's certainly a big jump from when I first did this analysis, when just 18% of executives were women. So it's always year after year interesting to see just how much more the industry is focusing on DEI.
Absolutely. So those are all executive positions. You're not just looking at C-level or C-level.
Right. This is all from the management pages, the executive leadership pages of all of the medical device companies, as well as their LinkedIn pages. This year, I also took a look at the number of years each executive has been in that role, and the average was 2 years. So it was interesting. And there were a few companies that didn't have women CEOs in the past. And one notable company was Ambu. But this year they announced that they appointed a new CEO who was a woman. So that some companies are showing this big push to diversify their board, which through many conversations I've learned it's obvious. The more diverse your board is, the more diverse your leadership is, the more diverse your ideas are, and the more you'll be able to address these unmet needs of these diverse populations that you wouldn't otherwise think of if you didn't have those ideas out there.
Yeah, I'm looking at, and I'd forgotten about Ambu. Thank you for reminding me. The CEO, and I looked up her name, Britt Milby Jensen. And I'd forgotten about that appointment because just anecdotally, or at least looking at the article, I think, Sean, you wrote it a couple of weeks ago talking about the CEO changes over the year in Medtech. I don't think I saw any pictures of women of the new CEOs that came in. I don't mean to call it individual companies, but overall as an industry, I didn't feel like at the CEO level I was seeing any sort of movement in that space. So maybe it's an unfair assessment, again, just observational, and I'm not identifying any one company, but there's a lot of, I think, really great talent out there. Karen Parkhill, at the CFO of Medtronic, Megan Scanlon at Boston Scientific. I mean, it would be great to see some folks who are maybe ready to take charge of a company be able to move in and lead some medtechs. As the organizer of a conference, it certainly would be great to have a deeper pool of interview subjects to draw from and to build better conferences and more representative conferences.
Even just thinking like the covers of medical design outsourcing, and I mean, just like the last 2 years, I've had some prominent medtech CFOs on the cover. So it'd be neat to see some of them, become CEOs.
That's right. I mean, Carleen Overton, CFO of Hologic, another one where you could imagine moving up into the corner office in a short time.
And to your point about there not being many women CEOs at some of the large medtech companies, in the same analysis, I found that there were only 6 companies that have women as CEOs. So out of 100, I mean, that's easy math that I can do. That's 6%. 6% of medtech companies have women CEOs. But even at those companies, they still, half of them hold below average C-suite positions. Women hold below average C-suite positions. So, for example, not to bring up Ambu again, but they didn't have any women in their executive suite last year for our analysis. And this year, now they're 50% women in top office because they have a CEO now.
Wow. That is interesting how that just bringing in someone who has a different network than your typical CEO can really diversify an executive team as well. And I guess I'm thinking now of, we recently reported on Fresenius Medical Care. It's going to have Carla Truitt as CEO. That didn't work out for whatever reason, but they brought in someone from within whose name I should have.
Helen Giza.
Thank you, Helen Giza, and she's CEO. So, good for them for elevating from within and giving the position to a woman. And yeah, I think as an industry, I think we can do a lot better.
Oh yeah, we can for sure do better. And in the article, the analysis that I posted, you can also just see that the breakdown of the roles that women hold within the industry, and the majority of that is human resources. So, I mean, it goes beyond positions like that. So, I mean, let's get some chief medical officers. Let's, some CEOs, like you said, or R&D leaders, things like that.
Absolutely. No, the industry can do better, and hopefully we'll see things improve in 2023.
Amen.
All right, we'll move on to number 8. Chris Newmarker, then. Let's go on to number 8 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers. I didn't say Newmarker's Newsmakers last year. Should we use Newmarker's Newsmakers for this, or we just want to go with stories of the year? What's better for branding?
Newmarker's Newsmakers 2022 Story of the Year edition.
All right, that'll make a hell of a trucker's cap. We'll do that. Okay.
All right.
Yeah. What is number 8 on the Newmarker's Newsmakers 2022 edition?
Our next, big story of the year is we've got the billionaires and brain-computer interfaces. We got. Have you ever heard of Elon Musk?
No.
He's not that much in the news. I mean, you hardly hear about him. He's very reclusive, But Elon's, he's got his brain-computer interface company Neuralink that has like some coin-sized brain-computer interface that you'd implant inside the skull, and he did a much delayed show and tell just a few weeks ago where he was doing things like showing monkeys playing Pong on a screen using a brain computer interface. Just a week or so later, there was a report from Reuters that they're actually, I believe it was from Reuters, Reuters reporting that they had sources saying there was actually a U.S. Agriculture Department investigation into potential animal welfare problems over there. But, he's got that going on. But, at the same time, you got Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, investing in, Synchron, which has this, really interesting tech where it's a BCI that's delivered via catheter. Jim, you talked to them actually just, earlier this year. I mean, what was your take on their technology?
Yeah, their director of neuroscience, Peter Yu, was gracious enough to explain the technology. And the idea that instead of, drilling holes in the brain to place them, you're going through, through the jugular vein and placing it. They've had good results with longevity and keeping them placed there. Good success in safely placing them, and it sounds like lower chances of infection. So it's definitely encouraging to see what's coming out there. Yeah. The money's following them, and I'm very excited to see what comes from them in this coming year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really neat idea because we already have so much experience like placing stents inside the vasculature at this point, and those type of devices can stay in people for a long, long time. And I know one of the biggest challenges with BCIs was having stuff that could be a long-term interface. So I mean, this kind of seems this might be one answer to that challenge, like that we could have something that's basically like a stent-like BCI that you have inside the a blood vein inside the brain. I'd also mention that we BlackRock Neurotech's been active in this space for a long, long time. Their Utah array has been kind of a standard in research, and they had a next gen BCI that they unveiled in November that Sean wrote about. I mean, gosh, this thing was like it's called neural lace because it looks like a piece of lace and it's thinner than an eyelash, and this is just like this really neat, thin, flexible electronics type of thing you could, put use to interface with the brain.
I mean, I think the variations between the different devices, the ones we've gotten to see, pictures or videos for, and the different, whether you are drilling a hole in the skull or putting it through the vasculature, it seems like it because it's such a young space, other than, like you said, BlackRock that has been around for so long with its, I believe it's the Utah Array, that's their long-standing device. But yeah, it seems like it's fun to watch sort of this new space come to the fore because of all the different looks and different types of technologies, and kind of watching it play out in real time to see which device or which method might work best.
No, I think the technology is certainly interesting, and certainly you could see it helping quadriplegics, folks who need help writing or unable to move their limbs. The compelling part of this story that I find, or the part I find most compelling, is just having Elon Musk on one hand, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates on the other. Granted, they're as investors, Musk is more engaged, but I have some concern about tech folks moving into medtech, just because their approaches can sometimes be different, particularly Elon Musk, who I think was Business Insider, and I think the Reuters article mentioned it as well, that he was motivating the engineers to work faster by suggesting that they work as if they have bombs strapped to their heads. in really putting pressure on them to make achievements. And while I'm sure everyone in medical devices works with some urgency in designing new products, safety and efficacy have to be paramount. And you can't just, with a medical device, try to break things like they did with Facebook. And I think that's concerning. And kind of the bookend of that for me, at least, is I'm comforted by the fact that there was strict sentencing for Sunny Balwani and Elizabeth Holmes regarding Theranos, because this isn't cryptocurrency. You can lose some money for people, and that's horrible enough. But if you're creating a test that's telling someone they have cancer when they don't, or telling people they don't have cancer when they do, there's no compensation for that. Certainly, a court can come up with a dollar figure, but it's not going to make up for the loss of a life. So, I hope that those sentences serve as just a warning shot across the bow of tech people who may come in here and think that they can just do things the way they've done it in other industries, because I don't think it necessarily applies. I think fresh perspective is great, but patient always comes first.
Yeah, and I think it says something that, the device companies we cover have very methodical processes for designing and creating devices and testing them out, and you can't play too fast and loose with that kind of stuff.
Could you imagine what your Facebook feed or your Twitter feed or your LinkedIn feed would look like if social media companies had to go through the kind of safety and efficacy studies that the FDA does? Because we've seen real harm on girls and self-image from Instagram. I mean, we certainly know how a lot of these social media networks are engineered to drive engagement, but to do that through fear and anger. And would we be better off without them? So you kind of get to that mission. What's the mission? Are they trying to sell ads? You come to Medtech where you really do feel that there's a mission to improving patients' lives.
Yeah.
And you're making money along the way, but people are in it for the right reasons. I think that's a big differentiator, and I don't know if that's the kind of thing that you can just jump from tech to Medtech and make that switch.
All right. Well, great point, Jim. Great discussion and great item, Chris. Jim, I believe you are delivering Newmarker's Newsmakers 2022 number 7.
Number 7. So the supply chain challenge. I mean, maybe you call it chaos, but that was definitely the top story of 2022, certainly over medical design outsourcing. I was really hoping we would leave this story back in 2021 when it first really hit us. The Texas freeze, taking the semiconductor fabs offline, hitting the petrochemical plants down in the Gulf and having all those plastic shortages. But really became clear early on this year that we wouldn't be so lucky to leave that back there. So still, the biggest issues are semiconductors and resins. Everybody's been dealing with it. You even heard Medtronic talking about how they literally had an explosion in their supply chain on the packaging side. I remember listening to that earnings call and wondering if Jeff Martha was perhaps being metaphorical when he said there was an explosion in the supply chain, but it really was a blast at a plant. And so it's a huge topic in all the meetings we have, whether we're conducting interviews or we're out at our own shows, DeviceTalks, out at conferences, meeting with suppliers, meeting with manufacturers, and everyone wants to know, is there light at the end of the tunnel? Because it's just such a huge burden to scramble and deal with all these decommits and the production lines at a standstill. So semiconductors, still in short supply everywhere. Though some device makers have reported success in getting their orders prioritized because, they're relatively low volume, but high impact. It's easy to say, hey, our chips are saving lives. Can you maybe bump us up to the top of the line? And then, we've got new chip fabrication plants in the works in the U.S. and abroad coming online as soon as next year. So hopefully there will be a little bit of relief, but the big buyers like the automakers are saying expect there still to be shortages through 2023. And then on the resin side, I was just talking with the plastics molder who says things are getting better for plastics, but prices still have ways to fall on the specialty resins for medical, like nylon 6. So, that's a concern. But again, hopefully things will be getting a little bit better. So what are people doing? We've been hearing, Tom, you had some interviews from the big OEMs like Medtronic, Boston Scientific, and they're saying they're moving toward fewer suppliers, but deeper, more strategic relationships. So, that's going to be a big trend that continues even if these shortages alleviate suddenly or at some time over 2023. But, I'm not a speculator and I'm not putting money on it, but I certainly wouldn't bet on a surprise and satisfactory conclusion to these shortages.
No, that's certainly an important one. And I think on the flip side, in response to the OEMs looking to create deeper relationships with fewer entities, you're seeing a lot of consolidation on the supplier side, where these suppliers want to be one-stop shopping for the OEM. So we're seeing companies just consolidate on their own. We're seeing even more private equity investing going on and roll-ups going on. So this is certainly a dynamic that I think is going to reverberate into 2023. So certainly an important one. Brian, are you seeing things on the pharma side, similar things on the pharma side?
It's a big issue in pharma as well. There's even several pretty high-profile drug shortages, including amoxicillin, like the popular antibiotic, Adderall, Tamiflu, which like the government just opened up like supplies from the stockpile for that, but some pretty significant drug shortages and also broader supply chain issues with ingredients.
I tell you, the infant and children's Tylenol and Motrin has been real hard to come by lately. I don't know if it's because here in Seattle we're so close to the border. Canada had huge shortages when they had their COVID wave, so people were crossing the border, driving clean out our shelves. And I know I was lucky enough to stock up, but every time I'm in the pharmacy, even this morning, picking up some last minute stocking stuffers before the storm hits, I checked out the shelves and it wasn't good. And Brian, some of that is regulated by the DEA, right, where they actually set quotas on things like Adderall as an upper limit on how much can be produced.
Yes, exactly right. So for Adderall, there is like a limit. It's a Schedule 2 drug, I believe, which means that it has medical potential, but it has also like abuse liability. So DA sets limits on how much can be produced each year. And then you have like this uptick in telehealth prescribing of Adderall, which has been controversial. And I think that's decreasing. But there's been this surge in demand for Adderall during the pandemic. And then like an incremental increase only from DEA and how much you can produce. So maybe that will persist into next year, the Adderall shortage, but it's been pretty significant for a lot of patients, some of whom have narcolepsy, not just ADHD, who can like potentially fall asleep while driving if they don't have their meds. So it's kind of a big deal.
That's interesting about the telemedicine and prescribing. I wasn't aware of that. Adderall definitely is not something that should be handed out like ibuprofen.
Evidently, it's quite common on campuses, Adderall for studying.
Jim and I were following a story. So I might have been in the beginning of the year. I don't remember which telehealth company it was, but there was one that, you just have your appointment online and they diagnose you with ADHD within the hour. And that's not how ADHD diagnosis actually happens. Like for ADHD, you have to go to a psychologist. You have to fill out like a 6-page survey and like sit in the office with a psychologist for 4 hours and then get referred to a psychiatrist who like doubles down on that diagnosis and then prescribes you the medication. It's like a months-long process, but this telehealth is doing it within a day, and that's kind of what also contributed to the shortages of Adderall. And I know, at least where I live, the Cleveland Clinic, number 2 hospital in the country, they only have just gotta throw it out there. Gotta throw it out there because I know Chris is by Mayo Clinic, so we have that battle going on. Yeah.
All right. Separate. Break it up, you two.
No, but I know Cleveland Clinic only has one doctor that prescribes Adderall in the entire ecosystem. There's only one doctor that prescribes Adderall and only one doctor that diagnoses ADHD as well. And he's also the child psychologist. So if you're an adult trying to get an ADHD diagnosis, you're going to a child psychologist. It's interesting what the telehealth and just scheduling Adderall as, like Brian said, a drug that's likely to be abused is how it's really affected everything.
Mm-hmm. I think the company was Cerebral. Another one's called Dunn.
Yeah.
I believe both of them are under federal investigation for handing out
Cerebral
Adderall too frequently. Yep.
Yeah, it was Cerebral.
That's correct.
Jim, have you or anyone, I've been thinking about this lately with the COVID restrictions being lifted in China and the impact they might have on people's ability to get to work. I mean, not that they were getting there necessarily before with the lockdowns, but has there been any discussion? Has anyone heard about what a rise in COVID cases in China, what impact that might have on supply chain?
It's not good, Tom. Not good. I mean, you've got China, U.S., and India are the top manufacturers of ingredients for pharmaceuticals. Obviously, gigantic manufacturers for outsourced components and devices, medical device. And we've got a lagging booster strategy apparently in China. The original series maybe have lost their effectiveness. So, when you've got potential for hundreds of millions of COVID infections in a short span of time, there's definitely going to be disruption. So, I've heard people advising if you have critical medications, stock up as much as you can because there may be further interruptions. I mean, it's not looking really good. It's in very early days. It's really hard to trust the numbers that come out of China. But I mean, even here in the U.S., we're not really. It's this long into the pandemic. We're still not don't have a way where you can report case numbers, and we don't really have a good handle on how truly widespread the outbreaks are here. So it's more of the same. But this could be a really bad winter.
All right, Chris Newmarker, what is number 6 on the vaunted Newmarker's Newsmakers of 2022 list?
On a more cheerful note, the surgical robotic space was already hot as we headed into 2022, and it's just got more interesting this year. There's just so much going on, so many different companies, trying, different approaches. I don't know, Tom, where do I begin? There's just so much.
Pick one spot and just start there. How's that sound?
Just pick a spot, just plant the flag. Well, but it's just this like really exciting space right now. Intuitive in the soft tissue surgical robotics space has been, pioneering this and doing this for decades. But now you got really big companies like Medtronic and J&J that are looking to compete against them in this. And you have some really exciting smaller companies like Stereotaxis and Vicarious Surgical that are in the process of moving forward with next gen robots right now. We'll be seeing more from them in the coming year. So that's just the basic lay of the land. But then my goodness, everything from Johnson & Johnson, we're still really waiting to hear what's going to happen with the Atava robot they're going to roll out. But then, we had news in November that they're partnering with CMR Surgical and, to sell its robots in Italy, France, Germany, and Brazil. They've got this CS surgical robot that's, kind of more compact, very, seems very versatile. So it'll be interesting to see what is J&J going to do more with CMR, through this. Moon Surgical. Oh my goodness, that was another really interesting idea. Instead of having it's not really as much, it's not, instead of it replacing or augmenting the surgeon, it's serving as a robotic surgical assistant, backing up the surgeon in the procedure and, kind of letting the surgeons do what they do. And they just recently got their 510K clearance. So really, really, really interesting company there as well. But what stuck out to you, Tom?
Oh, I think you've hit upon all the interesting ones, or many of the interesting ones. But one thing that has stuck with me, I read it a couple of weeks ago, an MIT professor, Ellen Roach, had, this is obviously an early stage thing, but she had a robotic diaphragm that was basically would allow someone, they're not testing it in humans yet, but just the idea now that maybe we're moving to a point where we'll have robotic elements within the body to help it function is really, really super fascinating. So we're looking probably a decade or more down the road, but to your point, I just feel like the surgical robotics field has hit is getting such great traction that maybe we're able to kind of push forward to what's next. So looking forward to seeing some great advances in this space.
And a ton of money pouring in too. CMR Surgical, at the end of last year when all the deals and dollars were counted, they ended up being the top VC funding recipient among all medtech companies in the world. I think it brought in about $600 million. So we tagged it as one of the hottest startups to watch. And that was before they even got into cahoots with J&J. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of money in the space, very exciting. And you're talking about Ellen Roach, her lab was also, I believe, working on some actuators inside of implants. The idea that these things will vibrate around and prevent scar tissue from building around the implants, so you can use them for drug delivery. So the robotics is so interesting. It's going to go so beyond surgical applications. Really, just an exciting space to keep an eye on.
And of course, you had profiled, and is it Endiatx? Am I saying it right?
Endiatx, yeah, that's
right. Yep. That's the swallowable robot.
Oh, yeah.
Which luckily is getting smaller and smaller. I was recently talking with the CEO. They're making some progress. I'm hoping to have a little bit of news to break on them around the beginning of the year. Can't say anything yet. But nice. Really encouraging where they're going.
definitely one of the most fun. It was definitely one of the most, one of the funnest medical design outsourcing covers this year was, him on the cover, getting ready to swallow his robots. So just wonderful, really fun stuff. He did that at Burning Man, right?
Yeah, the idea was that at some point when they were testing prototypes, he put one down the gut and handed out controllers to random folks out in the desert and let them swim around in his stomach.
Rock and roll. Wow. Hey, well, and it's just like, I mean, that was kind of the neat thing. Meanwhile, we still like Intuitive, and Intuitive, I mean, they're so well known for their Da Vinci robots, but they've been making strides with their Ion robot, which is kind of like this, has this articulating catheter for currently goes through airway passages in the lungs for cancer biopsies, but they're starting to at DeviceTalks West. I mean, Gary Goddard was saying, hey, we've obtained German regulatory approval to do a clinical study of using this for ablation, and I mean. And just kind of close it out, talking about this. I mean, the other really good point he added, DeviceTalks West, which I think anyone who wants to know more about robotics should make it to DeviceTalks West next October in Santa Clara. But I mean, he was saying he doesn't think people are gonna the term surgical robotics. He thought it was gonna just go away eventually. I mean, he thought in a decade or so because he's it's just gonna become a no-brainer. Like you're doing surgery, you're gonna have something robotic, involved with it.
Like internet banking. Yeah, we just all do our banking online.
Exactly.
But I think if people really want to know about surgical robotics, they should also go to DeviceTalks Boston, which is paired with our Healthcare Robotics Engineering Forum, which are both happening on May 10th and 11th. The cool thing about the Ion, I remember talking to, for Intuitive Talks, talking to the engineer involved with that, was that you can guide this tip through the tortuous pathways of the outer lung where it gets really hard to push through a device. And what was simple but kind of hadn't really occurred to me was that you can stop. The robot will kind of hold it in place. If you're using it manually, you really can't let go. But if the robot's guiding it, the robot can stop and they can assess the situation and try to figure out a way to go here or there. So it just allows you to get out much further into the lung and ultimately to take a biopsy to test material. But then they do want to get to the point where they can ablate the concerning tissue as well. So we're definitely a lot of cool stuff going on.
And also surgical robotics are one of the most interesting things to people who are outside of the medical device space, just like normal people. If you want to blow their minds, just tell them to go on YouTube and search. They did surgery on a grape, and what comes up is Intuitive, like 10 years ago, using their Da Vinci robot to do literally surgery on a grape, just removing the skin. And it's just fun showing people that aren't in the medical device industry that this is what they were doing 10 years ago. But now a company like Vicarious is developing a surgical robot that can go into your body and operate as doctor's arms with, articulating elbows and shoulders and all of that. So it's just fun. Surgical robotics is fun.
Great point. All right, well, I will take number 5 on our list of Newmarker's newsmakers, and this is an obvious one, I think, but it's one that's going to be with us for a long time. Just that the pressures on healthcare systems, specifically the workforce issues, and how medical device companies are going to really need to emphasize that their new devices save time, require less manpower or fewer nurses. And Chris, you talked about Moon Surgical and their surgical assistant tool. I think that's going to be a big part of it. I talked with Tom Poland, CEO of Becton Dickinson, yesterday. He'll be on the podcast in January. And a big part of their business is they say robotics, and it is a degree of robotics, but it's also automation for pharmacies to alleviate the pharmacist shortage, automation for testing in labs, making it easier to test more samples faster with fewer people. And I think Sean, you and I talked at DeviceTalks West. We had our panel with Nilesh Patel of Boston Scientific. These were all CMOs, Farzad Azampour of Edwards Life Sciences, and Nick West of Abbott. And they're all in one way or another conversing with healthcare providers and with surgeons, and they're coming back with these systems are under tremendous pressure from resignations and retirements, and we're not seeing the replacement of that workforce yet. So going forward, medical device companies are going to have to obviously prove efficacy, safety, and I think to win the business, they're going to have to demonstrate how they can streamline operations. So that'll continue to be a trend in 2023.
Yeah, it's just a huge opportunity for the device industry. Like anytime you have something that could, potentially make things more efficient, enable health providers to do more with, fewer people, which just seems to be a situation that, it's hard to see it going away. Like, these staffing shortages, even if, we end up, seeing something like a recession, just because so many, baby boomers are retiring. The population. I mean, gosh, I heard an expert on, public radio just, a few months ago talking about how, like, the global population is actually going to start decreasing later in the century. So we just need to do things more efficiently in healthcare. And, it's neat to see, Medtech stepping up and, trying to, come up with, ways to help.
So we had Andy Pierce on Stryker Talks recently. He's the head of MedSurg and neurotechnology at Stryker, talking about their Neptune surgical waste disposal system, which is able to basically, it makes it easier to collect polyps that are removed from gastrointestinal procedures. And just the way it's designed and the way it simplifies that process, the nurses are so enamored with it, making their lives that much easier, that he says they when they see it at a clinical meeting, they like to come over and give it a hug because they love the Neptune so much. So, but again, it's an area where if you have fewer nurses sort of having to manage those difficult tasks and make their job, or at least just make their jobs more pleasant, and not have to deal with things like that, that's certainly going to be a benefit. And remaining with gastrointestinal, we had Giovanni DiNapoli, president of gastrointestinal for Medtronic, talk at DeviceTalks West, talking about the use of AI that they have in their GI Genius, and how that's basically double checking the work of physicians performing colonoscopies to make sure that they're seeing all the polyps that they may see. He talked about how cases can be stacked, and again, it goes to overburden healthcare system one after the other, and you're probably better off. And I'm definitely paraphrasing here, but it sounded as if to me he said you're almost better off having your procedure done in the morning, because the later you go in the day, the longer they've been working at it, and maybe the way more things can be missed. And if I'm misstating what he said, I apologize. But that was my takeaway. That again, medical devices have to come up with a way to provide relief for overworked healthcare workers and
the
physicians.
fact that this GI Genius wasn't like saying this is a cancerous polyp, it's not doing that job for them. What's doing it, it's having little boxes popping up saying, hey, look at what we're highlighting here in this box and check it out, and so that way they aren't, they're hopefully catching more things that they need to examine when they're doing that procedure. And yeah, exactly. I don't have to, I'm getting up toward the edge where I'm going to have that procedure in coming years. And I definitely don't.
It's not as bad as they say. Don't worry about it, buddy. You'll be okay.
It's just people telling war stories, basically, or I mean,
just trying to scare the kids.
Like, you don't know, but exactly. When I get that procedure someday, I won't have to worry like what time of day it is, or whether the doctor had too little or too much coffee, or whatever. If there's a computer program that's helping them, to pinpoint stuff, and they could hopefully catch stuff that could otherwise potentially kill me. So it'd be good for them to catch that kind of stuff.
We don't want to kill Chris Newmarker,
please don't.
for sure. A bit of a programming note, Danielle Kirsh, our senior editor, had a very important thing she had to attend to, so she has left the call. So if we don't go back to Danielle for some of these upcoming points, it's not because she doesn't have really smart things to say. She just had to go help people, which is really
very cool.
All right, Chris Newmarker, let us roll it. What are we, number?
Wow, we're
4?
moving through it. Yes, we're at number 4. Number 4 on the list was Johnson & Johnson buying Abiomed for $16.6 billion. Definitely one of the top M&A deals this year. I mean, there was interestingly enough, we're talking on Thursday December, 22nd, and just today they closed the acquisition. This is a done deal. I mean, there was a lot of talk as JJ got ready to, spin off its consumer business that they were going to want to do a major medtech acquisition to kind of like right size the medtech with the pharma part of their business. There was, some speculation that maybe it might be Boston Scientific. But they went with another Massachusetts company, based company instead, Abiomed, which has just this really interesting technology, kind of this catheter delivered heart pumps, they're being their major product, kind of makes a lot of sense for Johnson & Johnson with their Biosense Webster business to to add the Abiomed technology onto their portfolio. So just like a major deal in the space.
Absolutely. And as we talked with Celine Martin, you talked with her at DeviceTalks West. I talked to her for DeviceTalks Weekly. She was excited that Johnson & Johnson, she had previously led Cordis as it was being divested from Johnson & Johnson back in 2015. She was happy that Johnson & Johnson's moving back into the heart device space, and hinted that maybe this is not going to be the only deal that Johnson & Johnson does. And just a hint, but there could be more movement there. So
we'll be keeping an eye on it.
No, but it was funny that at the Abimed's MedTech conference, I think maybe only a week or two before they announced the intent to acquire, Ashley McAvoy, the president of Johnson & Johnson MedTech, and Michael Minogue, the CEO of Abiomed, sat on a two-person panel and chatted about, the future of medtech and the trends in medtech. And I got to work on my people reading skills because maybe I should have been able to understand better that there was something going on. I don't know if there was anything going on, but I'm sure the plans had been in the works. But it was an interesting conversation. It's funny that they're working together now. Minogue is part of the succession plan, but the companies are joining forces.
Yeah, if they have a tell, they're good. They don't show it, so they're probably dangerous at a poker table. So just be careful. All right, well, we will shift our gaze over to the world of pharma. Brian Buntz, our pharma editor, what's your news item of the year? Your newsmaker of the year?
I think in the second half of the year, you saw potentially big changes in how we treat depression. So as you know, like the way we treat depression nutritionally is somebody goes to the doctor, they say they're depressed, and they try an antidepressant for 6 to 8 weeks to see if it works. They up the dose. If it doesn't work, they try something else, and they up it to the point that the side effects are tolerable, but they're often not pleasant. You try again. Each time you switch, the likelihood you'll see benefit lowers. So it's not really a very good paradigm. But in August, FDA approved like a quick acting antidepressant from this company called Axsome Therapeutics called Auvelity, which is interesting because it's actually 2 existing drugs that are available. One of them is like the active component in Robitussin. Strangely enough, the other one is the active component in Wellbutrin. They have a proprietary formulation of them together. It works within a matter of weeks or a week even. So it's much faster. In December, Biogen and Sage Therapeutics filed for approval for a neuroactive steroid for MDD, as well as for postpartum depression. FDA approved an antipsychotic known as cariprazine as an adjunctive therapy for MDD, which is major depressive disorder. So you would go to a doctor, and then if it's not working, you could have this added on to your therapy. And based on a phase 3 clinical trial, it increases efficacy. And then also in December, FDA granted fast track designation to a nasal spray that's a potential therapy for MDD. Then on top of all that, you have J&J got approval for esketamine back in 2019, which I think is still something of a niche product, but that's kind of like a alternative to the traditional kind of like infusion of ketamine that's gotten more popular too for depression, even though it's off label. And you have a couple of different companies in that space. I think Sean's written about one of them, Becton Biomedical, that's doing some studies on like a wearable device that would provide ketamine for, I think the first indication they're going after is postoperative pain, but potentially also mental health conditions. There's another company called HNMC Brain Health that's looking at ketamine, a small dose, prolonged release for depression. And then you have like all these companies going after psychedelics. Compass Pathways is in a phase 3 trial for psilocybin. There's other companies as well. I think that's kind of like a immature market overall, but perhaps something will shake out in the coming years. So I guess the broader theme is that the field is really evolving potentially, and in a few years, the paradigm could change kind of dramatically away from that. Let's give you a drug for 6 to 8 weeks, see if it works. If it doesn't, let's up the dose or give you a different medicine that may or may not help.
Wow, it could be great if they could have like more effective treatments. So it sounds like we got a chance that we could see, much better treatment of depression in coming years.
It sounds that way. It seems like the field will evolve considerably in the coming years. And the condition is really common. Like I've not seen stats about how the pandemic has affected it. But it seems like almost all psychiatrists agree that the pandemic has just increased the numbers. And I did see recently that 1 in 5 people in their lifetimes will get like MDD at some point in their lives. So it's really common. Yeah, it's millions of people in the US, across the world, have MDD, like clinical depression.
There's some potential on the device side this year as well for depression treatment. Going back to Synchron, they said one of the things that they're looking at for the potential to diagnose and treat with that implantable technology is depression, which again, it's an invasive procedure. But also there's some research that we wrote about MDO about using ultrasonic technology. The idea being that, we already know that whole body exposure to high frequency ultrasound increases human brain activity. So they said, all right, let's look at rats. Rats love high frequency ultrasound vocalizations, and let's see how that works. And they found some promising results. And that's obviously a non-invasive procedure. You're not putting a brain implant in, but you're kind of using ultrasound. So, you wouldn't maybe think of devices as having as much potential, but there's a couple bright spots there.
And we did see this year, Magnus Medical got 510K clearance from the FDA for its Saint neuromodulation system for the treatment of MDD, major depressive disorder. It's a neuromodulation device. So they had a FDA breakthrough path given to them last year, and they got approval to begin using it this year in September. So to your point, there's work going on the device side as well. It has been for a number of years, but it's such an important issue. It's nice to people have multiple options for relief.
It's exciting. It really feels like maybe people talk about 2022 as the year where we really started to get moving on some better treatments for depression. So it's going to be really neat to see how that all plays out.
Absolutely. And I think another exciting space we saw, Sean Whooley, why don't you bring us in to number 2 on the newsmakers? A lot of progress here as well.
Sure. Well, it's been an interesting year covering diabetes, and it's been nice to have this to share because it means that I had work to do and stuff to cover. But there's a multitude of different FDA clearances, major regulatory wins for some of the big players in diabetes, including Dexcom's G7, which just happened a couple weeks ago. Insulet got FDA approval for its Omnipod 5 next generation pump, Abbott's Freestyle Libre 3 in May, I believe it was, and Senseonics as well, which I initially had Dexcom, Insulet, and Abbott as my big 3, but Senseonics, and I remember that the FDA cleared their 180-day CGM. So yeah, it's been a massive year for all these diabetes technologies, and it's been really fun to watch each of them sort of, I understand that CGM is sort of one thing, so it's interesting to see each of these companies coming forth with their own product and why it's different or why it's special. And it's been a fun year in diabetes, and I'm imagining it'll continue into 2023.
We had Paul Grant of CEO of the Medtech Innovator on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes a few years ago, and he's an avid user, a recent user, but he's avidly a fan now of Dexcom
G6, and he was very much looking forward to the G7 rolling out, because he was saying the G6 was just fantastic for just like giving him a little. I mean, he said he didn't have to control his diabetes with insulin, because of the fact that he could just get this, alert on his phone saying, that he needed to, basically go out and get a walk and get his, blood sugar back under control. So, I mean, just having that kind of access to real-time information is just wonderful.
I tried one maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah, you tried it. Yeah, you gave it a go.
Yeah, pop it on your belly and then you get updates on your phone.
Fantastic.
You can see if you have bread pudding that your blood sugar goes way up.
Well, Paul's point at the end was that he sees a day when that everyone's using one of those to just sort of monitor their blood sugar, because it is a significant enough health issue that if we had the ability, and maybe it gets transferred to our watches or something like that, and it's a little more approachable, but certainly be something to track.
I mean, what, Sean, how big is the G7 sensor? The latest Dexcom, that's like the size of penny.
Yeah, I know Abbott,
Oh,
because
yes.
we used the photo for Abbott's Freestyle Libre, is
Yep.
next to a penny, but I believe G7 is similarly sized. It's small. It's 60% smaller, they say, than the G6. And yeah, it's pretty impressive, how small they can make these, really vital pieces of technology that the idea now, they've obviously developed them over time, but the idea now is you stick it on and you kind of forget about it until it tells you that you need to remember it. But it's interesting. And I spoke with Jake Leach, the chief operating officer of Dexcom, last week, and I asked him, half jokingly, what about G8? When's that coming? And he's like, hey, we're always innovating. He says we start working on the next one before the current one's out. So it's always fun. They're going to keep moving and keep innovating.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you look at what both Abbott and Dexcom are doing. I mean, it just seems like the sensors are just getting smaller and smaller, and it could make sense. We could just get to the point where, like, that could be something that any of us could, if you're just someone who really wants to monitor your health, like it could be that could be really useful.
What kind of stood out to me too, though, is like that it's not the most green technology. Like the applicator that you have for the G6, you have a brand new one every time you use it, and all those go in the trash. Like you can't recycle it. So I think for the G7, it's a similar applicator. So the device, it may be pretty small, but the applicator is not tiny. And if you have a fresh one for every time you put it on, and that goes to landfill for every patient, that's a pretty substantial amount of waste.
Yeah, I wish I had the exact information. I know Leach actually mentioned on our call that the packaging is 68% smaller or something like that. So they're making an effort to go greener. So I wonder if that will play into the future innovations.
Makes a lot of sense.
Brian, you're a fairly fitness minded fellow. Did you find the tracking of your levels helpful at all?
I mean,
was it something you wish you had access to?
I started jogging after I wore one, and I'm still doing it. Because it shows you. I mean, I think I was not pre-diabetic, but like it shows you like how much it goes up, and definitely is informative.
Wow,
that's fascinating.
It kind of makes you like think differently about like maybe I shouldn't have that other whatever it is, like beer, piece of bread, whatever. You can see it.
Now I want
one. You're like, holy heck.
It's a good question, is whether they may end up becoming a tool for the general population to start, like an Apple Watch has started to help people pay attention to their fitness, how a CGM could somehow keep people's diets in check. And,
I mean, it could be something like Brian did. You wear it for a week, and you just kind of have a benchmark, and you're like, oh my God, like that went up when I did this, and it went down when I did that. I'm going to do less of this and more of that.
Yeah.
It's interesting because there's things that I didn't know, at least as a non-expert in the space. Like you put it on, like, and if you like sprint, your blood sugar goes way up, which I didn't know. But if you go for like a moderate walk, it goes down. So there's like a threshold where your like activity level causes it to go up. So it's stuff like that you learn just by having it on.
Wow. So even if it's just for a short period, you gain insights out of it. That's really cool.
It sounds like a good opportunity for me. But all right, great stuff, Sean Whooley. Chris Newmarker, you want to drive it home with your big number one?
Yeah. Number one on the list this year. It's actually a really tough story. Actually, is the massive recall of Philips respiratory devices that started in 2021, but things just seem to get just worse with it this year. Involves millions of devices, effectively pulled Philips out of the respiratory devices market when it started in 2021. At this point, we've had reports just, mounting from FDA of, at this point, or latest tally from FDA is that they've received they've now received 90,000 reports of problems, and and 260 of those reports mentioned deaths. So it's just it's certainly, if not the most serious recall the industry's seen, it's definitely one of the most serious recalls. And at this point, Philips is in consent decree talks with the DOJ, FDA. They have a new CEO, Roy Jacobs, who's publicly apologized over this recall. And he actually was put in charge of managing the recall last year. Now he's running the whole company. And but we still we had just a story just last month about how some of their some of the ventilators, they said about 3% of these millions of devices that would come to about 165,000 of them, they had been reworked, but now there were new problems. So they're reworking them and they're getting even more problems. So we'll see in the new year how this finally gets resolved. Just today, actually no, yesterday, Sean had a story about them. Philips releasing a report saying that they were saying some tests with their DreamStation CPAPs were showing that this degradation of the sound abatement foam that's behind the major problem behind these recalls, that it was showing unlikely harm to health. But then at the same time, you got all these reports with FDA. So I don't know. It's definitely a tough story.
Have we seen anything bleeding over? I would have thought by this time there would have been maybe other problems emerging with other companies. I haven't seen that. I wonder on the apnea side, are people just saying, forget about it, I'm not going to use a device because of all these problems? Does anyone know? We haven't really prepped for this part of the conversation, but I haven't heard ResMed saying they've been hit. I haven't. Inspire doesn't seem to be suffering from this. There seems to be.
Well, actually, no. ResMed, ResMed has not had a recall like this.
In terms of interest in CPAP machines, it seems like people still see the importance of the condition and the need to maintain it, manage it, but they're moving over to other devices to do so.
The other really tough aspect of the recall is that obviously this would be a huge opportunity. It's been a huge chance for ResMed to grab even more market share in the CPAP space. People need this therapy. It's been a challenge for ResMed to increase its production amid supply chain constraints. So you've got people who have been using Philips CPAPs who would really like to move over to something else, and it's tough to get their hands on a new CPAP from ResMed. And ResMed's even tried to they've moved toward more kind of stripped down CPAPs with less electronics, but it's just still been a big challenge. And then actually Inspire, it's been it's been a very promising year for Inspire, because they are this alternative technology, this neat implantable neurostim device that could treat your sleep apnea. So maybe down the road, this will be viewed as something that got a lot more people interested in that type of therapy versus just doing CPAPs.
No, I'm curious about the report I did yesterday, just about the numbers, because they said that, so much of the devices that seemingly cause so many problems, all of a sudden, well, actually, they're not causing that much, it's not appreciable harm, I think was the terminology. And so I'm interested to see if those are maybe cherry-picked numbers or devices, or how it shakes out from here, because it's definitely, for all the trouble it's caused for the company, for them to release a statement saying, well, actually, it doesn't seem that bad right now based on the tests we've done. I'm not really sure where to look.
I definitely think they're seeking, they're laying out a case and providing, data to try, to offer defense for themselves. I'm pretty sure when all the lawsuits really start coming down, I'm sure that study you wrote about, Sean's going to be one of the things that Philips is including in their, defense briefs.
All right. Well, that is certainly a legitimate number one story of the year, and I'm sure it'll continue to make news in 2023 and beyond. So with that is our top 10 newsmakers of the year. I think we Newmarker's newsmakers of the year of 2022. I think really great job. I think we've covered a lot of different areas. We have a broad editorial team. You can find us all on LinkedIn. And please connect with our Mass Device page on LinkedIn, our Mass Device group, our DeviceTalks group on LinkedIn, our medical design and outsourcing group on LinkedIn.
Overall, you've got to. Am I going to do it this time?
Sean, you do it.
What is it? No, just I know what it is. I'll let Chris do it.
Get a like, follow, subscribe.
Like, follow.
Come on, Sean.
And or subscribe to our many LinkedIn pages. Sean, you do. What are the news sites that you're overseeing?
I do a lot of work with mass device and drug delivery business news mostly, but you might find my name all over the place.
And Brian, what are the pharma publications you're putting out?
Drug discovery and development and pharmaceutical processing world.
Fantastic. And Jim Hammerand, we've got a special issue coming out in a couple of weeks.
That's right. Our leadership edition kicks off 2023. You can start reading some of those stories right now on our website, and we'll have it all pulled together in mid-January.
All right, great. And Chris Newmarker, since Danielle had to leave, what is some of the pages she's overseeing?
You can find Danielle everywhere, but she especially has a focus on our medical tubing and extrusion site, our women in medtech stories, and MDO. So you can definitely catch her here. And of course, I'm around everywhere as well, but I've been especially active lately on Mass Device.
Great. So that's great. And please do. I'm in charge of DeviceTalks, the podcast. We have Intuitive Talks, Stryker Talks, Medtronic Talks. We've got more coming out in 2023. So make sure you subscribe to the DeviceTalks podcast network so you can have all of those except for Medtronic Talks sent directly to your listening device. Medtronic Talks has its own channel on every major podcast application. And please do subscribe so you don't miss a future episode of any of our fantastic podcasts. And please share this episode, which I think has a lot of cool insights and observations in it, on social media. And again, link to any and all of us on LinkedIn, because we'd like to be part of those conversations. So, all right, folks, great job, everybody.
And happy holidays, everybody, and catch you in 2023.